If you've recently purchased the MegaPoints controller's multi-panel plug-and-play starter kit Servo edition, this is the video for you. It's an update video to an existing video, and it includes all of the software changes to the Servo controller from the 1st of September 2018. So if we look in the box, you'll see it has various information, including a quick start guide. And the quick start guide is basically the contents of this video, but instead of having to read it, I'm going to walk you through it. Included in the box are a pair of Servo controllers, each one providing 12 channels of control for points, semaphores, gates, barriers, doors, etc. 12, 24. And the brains of the whole system, the multi-panel processor itself. And this is what you'll fit to your Mimic panel, and it will provide all of the display logic for all the buttons and all of the pairs of LEDs that connect it. It also contains a sample cable pack comprising of network cable, a sample button, a pair of LEDs, wires and some pull-up jumpers for your Servo controllers. The first thing you're probably going to want to do is hook up some power to this. And power comes from a regulated 12 volt power supply, up to a maximum of 13.8 volts, but absolutely no more. Power is delivered through this little screw terminal here and here. So what you'll do, you'll connect your power lead. This is the end of a male-female Servo extension lead, and I've taken the shroud off to reveal the pins. But I recommend that you just use a normal piece of wire with bare ends that are turned over. I use this because I'm connecting to devices all day long and I wanted a connection that would last. If I now hook this up to some power at the opposite end of the lead, you should see we've got one light on the multi-panel, the master light, and it's on and lit permanently, and the run light is flashing. And if the light is flashing, it tells us this board is working and the processor is running. All of our boards that have a microcontroller fitted have a flashing light. The flashing light is controlled by the microcontroller, and that simply gives you feedback, yes, it's powered and it's working. Let's apply some power to the Servo controller. I'll take another lead, put it into the screw terminal. You may have to undo them first and gently tighten it. Don't overdo it, just slightly and snug will do. And I'll attach some power to this and energize it. And if we look now again, we have a flashing light, in this case the channel light on the Servo controller. That tells us the board is running and everything's looking good. Now before we connect these together, if we take a Servo and we plug it into channel 1, and in this case the Servo, the lightest lead, orange in this case but it's often white, goes to the inside of the Servo controller. So the light lead comes to this side of these sets of pins, and you can see I've plugged it into channel number 1, and the channels are numbered 1 to 12 to allow you to connect up to 12 servos to this device. Let's do a basic test and make sure this unit's working before we introduce the multi-panel. If you take one of the network cables from your starter kit, it's a male-male plug on either end. What we're going to do, we're going to use it as a test lead. So I'm going to connect the white pin only to the SC bottom connector. SC stands for switch common. Think of it as the ground lead. So I'm just going to put the white lead on only, and the other two are dangling out. And the opposite end of the cable, I'm going to take the white lead and I'm going to touch it to the S1 at the top. And what that should do is operate the Servo manually. And there's the Servo going one way, unplug it, and it comes back. So we've seen now this board is working, the Servo is working, we have a good connection, and we've seen the Servo operate, like so. Okay, disconnect the cable. And what we'll do now, we'll use the cable to connect it to the multi-panel itself. So if I bring the multi-panel back into the frame, what I'm going to do is attach the cable to the network ports on the multi-panel here. Now if you look carefully, you'll see there's two sets of connectors with rows of 3 pins. They're the same, so it doesn't matter which one you use. What does matter is the way you insert the plug. Now, they're labelled SDA on the outside, and what I tend to do is use the white end or the white connector for the SDA. So I'm going to plug that in, and that's a good connection. Now, it doesn't matter which way round that goes, it matters which way round the other end goes. Because the white is on the SDA here, I want the white at this end of the lead to go to the SDA here as well. And in the case of the servo controller, that's the top. Plug it in, and the two are hooked up. Now, as it comes out of the box, the servo controller is in master or switch input mode. That means it's trying to receive commands from the switches here, and you saw one demonstrated when I used this lead as a test lead. What I need to do is change the mode of the servo controller to slave or network mode, so it expects commands to come from the multi-panel via this single network cable. To set the servo controller into slave mode, you turn the power off to the servo controller, and at this point you hold the low button down, just the low, nothing else, and then turn the power on, and as soon as you see an LED, let go. Did you notice this time when it started, the lights flashed in an alternate pattern? Then you got a few more flashes on the channel LED, and now it's back to a normal flash. Now we've changed the mode, it's going to stay in that mode all the time, or until you choose to change it again. If I turn the power off to the servo controller, and then I switch it back on, you can see they're flashing alternate, and then what it's doing, it's flashing the device ID or network address of the servo controller. And if you look at the channel light, I'll do it one more time, you'll count 2. 1, 2. And that tells me this has been set to the device ID of number 2, which is great. This is number 1 automatically. The first servo controller will be number 2. The second servo controller will be number 3, and so on. And this is how you can control, with expansion, up to 192 servos or any other motor types on this network. So I've pulled back a little bit on the shot, so hopefully you can see everything that's connected. So just to recap, I have my network cable attached to the network port on the multi-panel, and I have it connected to the network port on the servo controller. And I've taken care to make sure that whatever is connected to the SDA pin on the multi-panel, i.e. the outsidemost pin, is connected to the SDA or the topmost pin on the servo controller. What we need to do now is hook up one of the supplied test LEDs to the multi-panel. So if you take the LED connector with the black lead towards the outer edge of the multi-panel, plug it in to channel number 1. And channel number 1 is identified by the number 1 above it. Across the top row you'll see channels 1 to 24. We have a servo attached to channel 1 of our first servo controller, so it makes sense that channel 1 here will control channel 1 here. If you now take one of the test buttons and plug in the fly lead for the button, so you've connected a cable to it, attach this to channel 1 at the bottom, which is the switch input. Make sure the black lead is towards the outer edge of the multi-panel. And now what we have is a pair of LEDs, one is illuminated, and a switch connected to channel 1, and a servo attached to the first servo controller. When I press this button, the lights will flash and the servo will move. And there it goes. And once it stopped flashing, I can press it back and the servo moves back. So at this point, we've successfully connected our first servo controller to our multi-panel, set up the network, plugged in a servo, and we've seen it work. I've now switched things around and I'm using my demonstration kit, which you will have seen if you've been to an exhibition recently. The multi-panel processor is in a cradle because I have a battery underneath, and that's so that I can operate it and move it without having an extra battery lead. And if I turn it on, you can see I have the solid master light and a flashing run light. I also have a pair of servo controllers, so I can effectively show you the 24 channels hooked up without having leads running everywhere connecting all of these. They're all connected in the box. So what I'm going to do, just to recap, is attach my network cable with the white lead to the outer SDA socket on the multi-panel, and the white lead going to the first servo controller, to the SDA socket, which is towards the center on this. And this is again configured by default to use the switch as an input. So I'm going to turn the power off, hold the low button down, turn the power back on, and now we get the slave flash, and the unit is now responding to the multi-panel. If I take the LED pair, there we go, the multi-panel's in control now. If I take the LED pair and plug into channel 1 with the outer lead towards the outer edge, I have one of the two LEDs on, and I'll do the same for the button. Here's the button, and I'm going to use the black lead towards the outer edge of the button connector on channel 1, and you'll see when I press the lead, let's get this switch, the lights, let's position the lights so you can see them. The servo moves when I press the button and the lights flash, and when it's finished moving they stop, and so on. So if I move this button from channel 1 to channel number 8, just the button, I'm not moving the lights now. When I press the button, I should see servo connected to channel number 8 move. Press, and there it moves. Press it again, and it moves back. And if I put it into channel number 12, we should see the last servo move. And that's because this board has been set to device ID number 2. This is ID 1, automatic. This is 2, we've just set. By enabling slave mode, the default ID is 2, so it works with the first 12. Let's bring on the second 12. I take another cable, I plug it into the servo controller so that the SDA lead is on the white. Now before I attach it, I'm going to set slave mode. Power off, hold the low button, power on. And you can see again, this dutifully does the bicolor flash, and then you get 2 flashes on the channel. Now I can connect the other end of this lead either to the socket on the multi-panel, or if it's more convenient, to the servo controller that's already on your baseboard, and there's the multi-panel controlling it. Because ultimately this will end up with these devices on your baseboard and this in your control panel, and this is your sole connection between the two. So instead of having 24 solenoids, for example, with up to 70 odd wires coming back to a bank of switches on a control panel, you've just got this. Life is good. So let's move the switch back onto channel number 1, and let's see channel number 1 work. Let's get the LEDs out, press the button and press O. Now if you look, this one moved, but this one did as well. Let's press it back. And if you remember, the default network address or device ID is 2. So these two guys are on the same channel. They're going to respond to the same range of inputs, 1 to 12, 1 to 12. That might be quite useful if you have a long fiddle yard and you want to operate the roads in and out as a pair. How easy is that? Just that cable and away to go. But really on this setup, we want this to be 1 to 12 and this to be 13 to 24. So let's fix that. What I'm going to show you now is the latest way with the servo controller software update from the 1st of September. So if you purchased your starter kit in September 2018, this is how you're going to do it. What you do, whilst it's in slave mode, press the high button once to increment or move up the network address once. So press and hold, it'll take about half a second, you'll see both lights come on and the job is done. Press and hold high now. The lights are on, you can let go, the board restarts and we'll get 3 flashes. Did you see the 3 flashes? And it's remembered that forever. And now the servo controller has gone to where the positions 13 to 24 are commanded. Let's test it. Here's my button and my lights on channel number 1. Press the button, only number 1 is moving. Number 13 is not. How do we test 13? We move the switch to channel 13, and for good measure, let's move the LED onto channel 13 as well. Here's my lights, here's my button, press, and channel 13 servo moves. Press it again and it moves back. Let's test channel number 24. I'll plug the LED into 24 and I'll plug the button into 24. Press the button and channel number 24 is working. For the sake of completeness, I'm going to show you how to do this using an earlier version of the software where the up and down buttons don't allow you to change the network address. So what I'm going to do is disconnect this from the network, turn the power off, and I'm going to press and hold both middle buttons while I turn it on. That's going to do a factory reset of this board, so it's going to now look exactly how it was when it would have been shipped to you in the starter kit box. And I'm going to move my lights and my buttons onto channel number 13, like so. So this unit is in master mode because when you turn it on, the channel light immediately flashes. So let's get ready to set the network address. Now, if you look on the website, on the shop under the Servo controller product, you'll be able to download the user guide. And the user guide, there's a user guide for the Servo controller and there's also a user guide for the MultiPanel. And they go into much more detail than the 2-page sheet of quick start instructions you get in the starter kit. So this is really where the real information is. There's new features and there's a chart here and it's telling us when we fitted that and the version and the board number it was introduced and so on. So what we're looking for on page 15 is this little chart, and that's going to show you how to set the switches on the first 4 inputs to get the appropriate device address for this adapter on the for the servo controller on your network. Now, the earlier versions of the starter kit also came with this Popon switch device, and what that allows you to do, let's see if I can get this to focus. Come on, give me some focus. Hold on. It allows you to set the network address using the switches at the top, S1 to S4. And it's a bit like connecting all of the switches to this. If I fit this Popon switch onto the switch inputs, you'll see I can directly manipulate the servo controller inputs because they're connected just like you'd wired up 12 switches. So if I operate switch 1, you should see servo number 1 move one way and the other. What I'm using this board for though is to tell the unit to set the network address. And what I want to do is set network address 3. And the way that's done according to this chart, address 3 is to have the switches open, closed, closed and closed. In English, that means switch number 1 is set off, and off is to the out. 2, 3 and 4 are set to the on. And it's like a binary counter. So that's setting up that address. And what you do now, turn the board off, hold the low and program buttons down and turn the power back on. You'll see the board go through the flash and then I'll get 3 flashes on the channel, and that's the network address programmed. But I think you'll agree, the change we made to the software to use the high and the low is far simpler. Let me connect the network cable. And now when I press, there's the multi-panel taking control of them all. And when I press the button that's attached to channel 13, you can see I have it working here as well. So right now I have 2 servo controllers controlling 24 servos connected to the multi-panel in the starter kit with the sample LEDs and switch provided. So this concludes the quick start part of the guide for the multi-panel plug and play starter kit servo edition. Ultimately, the end game though would be to have a proper mimic panel, which you'll either make yourself or we'll make for you. So you'll end up with a panel like this. Let's turn it on. I have my servo controllers on the baseboard doing the heavy lifting. And then I'll have a lead, probably a lot longer than this, coming back to my multi-panel, which is in a nice looking mimic panel box. And as I press buttons, you can see now everything's synchronized up. Press a button and I can operate turnouts on my servo controllers without having a mass of cables running around my layout. Thank you so much for watching. I hope the video was of use to you. Now you've seen the basics on getting going, you can look at our other videos to see how you would connect a servo to a set of points, or how you might configure a frog switch to work in conjunction with that. There are over 85 videos on our YouTube channel. Thank you for watching.